The air was thick with anticipation as Marcus packed the last of their bags into the trunk of his old, battered car. The trip to the remote cabin in the woods had been his sister Alicia's idea. She had been struggling with nightmares for months, nightmares that were starting to feel all too real. As the darkness of winter crept in, she begged him to take her away, to some quiet, isolated place where she could find peace. The cabin, inherited from their late grandmother, was the perfect solution. No one had been there in years, not since their grandmother had passed. Marcus didn't believe in ghosts or spirits, but Alicia's pleading eyes and fragile state had worn him down. He couldn't bear to see her like this anymore. If this was the only way to get her to heal, he'd go along with it. He didn't know much about the cabin beyond its quiet seclusion, but it was secluded, cold, and had a strange history tied to the family. Stories about the cabin whispered from one relative to the next, though Marcus had never put much stock in them. Alicia, on the other hand, was always quick to listen, quick to believe. The journey was long, the snow falling heavily now, blanketing the world in thick layers of white. As Marcus drove, he glanced at his sister, sitting silently beside him. Her eyes were wide and distant, staring out at the swirling snowflakes. Her long, braided hair fell across her shoulders like a heavy curtain, but it was her unnerving silence that unsettled him more than anything. "We'll be fine," Marcus said, trying to reassure both himself and her. She turned toward him, offering a weak smile, but he could see the fear in her eyes. "We're just going to clear your mind, okay? No distractions, no stress. Just you and me, the mountains, and some fresh air. That's all." Alicia nodded, but Marcus could tell she wasn't convinced. Her nightmares were not just dreams. He didn't know the details, she hadn't said much, only that they were getting worse, more vivid. The whispers of the cabin's dark past had haunted her mind, but Marcus believed it was nothing more than her anxiety feeding on those old family tales. As they reached the cabin and parked outside, the stillness of the place hit them both like a sudden gust of icy wind. The dark wooden structure stood like a monument to forgotten times, surrounded by towering pines and thick snow. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the branches as if the forest itself were alive, watching them. Alicia hesitated at the door, and Marcus felt a cold chill, not from the winter air, but from something deeper. They were alone now. Just the two of them, in the wilderness, trying to escape from something that Marcus couldn't quite understand. But he had no idea that this trip would awaken something far more dangerous than any nightmare Alicia had been having. The creaking of the old cabin door echoed in the empty air as Marcus stepped inside, pushing against the heavy wood with a grunt. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams of sunlight filtering through the thick curtains. The scent of old pine and stale air filled his lungs as he looked around. The cabin was smaller than he remembered, but it had a certain charm, even in its run-down state. A worn couch sat by the fire, an old dining table with chipped edges, and shelves lined with faded books, untouched for years. "Home sweet home," Marcus said, trying to lighten the mood. He glanced over at Alicia, who had remained silent ever since they'd entered. Her eyes were wide, her lips trembling. He didn't understand her reaction. It was just an old cabin, what could be so terrifying about it? "I don't know about this, Marcus," Alicia whispered, her voice tight. She stood near the door, clutching her jacket as if she wanted to bolt. "Something feels wrong." He turned toward her, his brow furrowing. "Alicia, it's just an old house. We're here to rest, to get you away from all the stress. Come on, let's settle in, okay?" She didn't respond immediately, still staring at the shadows creeping through the corners of the cabin. The fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth failing to reach the cold chill settling over the room. Alicia's voice was barely audible when she spoke again, her words almost lost in the soft hum of the wind outside. "I feel like someone's watching us." Marcus' eyes widened slightly. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He had been trying to be the supportive brother, but now that he saw the panic in Alicia's eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Alicia, you've been through a lot lately. Maybe you're just imagining things. This place is empty. But Alicia wasn't convinced. She had seen something, he could tell by the way she was scanning the room, the way she stepped backward, inching closer to the door. I heard noises last night, Marcus. Faint whispers, like voices, she trailed off, her words swallowed by the growing wind. I'll take a look outside, Marcus offered, walking toward the back door. Get some fresh air. You stay inside, okay? Alicia nodded, her fingers tightly gripping her jacket as she moved further into the cabin, her eyes darting nervously toward the windows. Marcus stepped outside, his breath coming in quick bursts as the cold air hit his skin. The snow was falling harder now, a thick blanket covering everything. He scanned the area around the cabin, but there was nothing, just the howling wind and the quiet forest. As he turned back toward the cabin, he noticed a flicker of movement near the window. It was just a shadow, but something about it made his heart race. Before he could react, the sound of something crashing inside the cabin rang out, followed by Alicia's terrified scream. Marcus rushed back into the cabin, his heart pounding in his chest. Alicia was nowhere to be seen. Panic set in as he called her name, his voice cracking in the silence. The once inviting warmth of the fire now seemed distant and cold. He ran through the cabin, checking every room, but she wasn't there. The only sound was the beating of his own heart as it echoed in his ears. He found her at the foot of the stairs, her face pale as she trembled uncontrollably. Her eyes were wide with terror, locked on the staircase above her. I saw it, Marcus, she whispered hoarsely. It's here. Marcus followed her gaze up the stairs, but there was nothing there, no figure, no movement. But Alicia was convinced. She looked like she had seen a ghost. What did you see, Alicia? A shadow. It was standing at the top of the stairs, watching me. She paused, her voice catching in her throat. It wasn't human. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. He knelt beside her, trying to comfort her, but his mind raced. Could it be her imagination? Could the stress of her nightmares have gotten to her? He didn't believe in ghosts, but the terror in Alicia's eyes made him question everything. Before he could speak, a low moan filled the cabin, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps coming from the second floor. The floorboards creaked under the weight of something unseen. Marcus jumped to his feet, grabbing Alicia's arm and pulling her toward the door. But as he turned, he froze. At the top of the stairs, a shadowy figure stood, its features obscured by darkness, its form barely discernible. Alicia gasped, her body going rigid with fear. Run! Marcus shouted, but before they could move, the figure lunged. The air grew cold, the temperature dropping with an unnatural suddenness. The shadows seemed to envelop them, and a scream tore from Alicia's throat. The figure was upon them, but just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving only the thick, bone-chilling silence. Marcus looked around, his eyes wide with terror. What was that? What had just happened? He turned to Alicia, but she was collapsed on the floor, her face ashen, her eyes filled with raw fear. As the night deepened and the wind howled outside, Marcus and Alicia huddled by the fire. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The attack had been too real, too tangible, to dismiss. Alicia trembled as she told Marcus the story she had been avoiding for years, the story of the family curse. The cabin had belonged to their ancestors for generations. Their great-grandmother, a woman with strange, unexplainable abilities, had always been at the heart of the family's dark history. It was said that she had made a pact with an entity from the other side, trading the lives of her children for wealth and prosperity. But the deal had come at a steep price. Every descendant of that line would be hunted by the entity, forced to live in its shadow until the end of their days. Alicia had learned this from old journals found in the attic. Journals that told of strange occurrences, inexplicable deaths, and eerie happenings that plagued their family. The entity, a spirit known only as the Watcher, would follow them, haunting them in their dreams, feeding off their fear. Marcus listened, his skepticism wavering as the wind howled outside. The chill in the room seemed to grow, and the whispers that had plagued Alicia's nightmares seemed to echo through the walls. "You think this Watcher is real?" Marcus asked, his voice thick with doubt but edged with fear. Alicia nodded, her eyes wide with terror. "I don't know, but it's been following us. It's here, Marcus. It's here for us." The temperature in the room plummeted, and the flames in the hearth flickered violently as if something was interfering with them. Alicia's breathing quickened, and Marcus looked around, panic rising in his chest. Then, from the corner of the room, the shadowy figure reappeared. This time, it was clearer than before, its form taller and more distinct, with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness like twin lanterns. Alicia gasped, clutching Marcus' arm, her fingers digging into his skin with terror. "It's him," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "the Watcher." Marcus felt the air grow colder, a heaviness settling on his chest. His heart raced as he backed away, trying to pull Alicia to safety, but there was nowhere to go. The figure moved closer, its feet never touching the floor. It hovered, an ethereal presence in the room, watching them both with an intensity that made Marcus' skin crawl. "What does it want?" Marcus demanded, trying to sound brave but failing to conceal his fear. "It wants us. It wants me," Alicia said, her voice breaking. "The curse, it's real. It's coming for me, Marcus." Marcus's mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some twisted hallucination, a product of Alicia's nightmares. But the figure before him, the intense cold in the room, the oppressive weight of fear, it was all too real. The shadow moved forward, and the temperature dropped even further. It seemed to be feeding off their fear, growing stronger with each passing second. Alicia screamed, pulling at Marcus, but it was no use. They were trapped in the cabin, and the Watcher was closing in. A sudden memory flashed through Marcus' mind, something their grandmother had said before she passed away. A warning about the curse. A way to break it. She had spoken of a ritual, an ancient one that could banish the entity forever. But Marcus had never believed it, he had always thought it was just a crazy old story. But now, with the Watcher so close, he realized that the only hope they had was to try. They had to fight back. In the hours that followed, the atmosphere in the cabin grew unbearable. The Watcher was relentless, its presence hanging in the air like an oppressive weight. The figure appeared and disappeared in flashes, always watching them, always lurking in the shadows. Each time it appeared, the air grew colder, and the whispers, those haunting, disembodied voices, grew louder, surrounding them like an invisible storm. Marcus tried to keep Alicia calm, but her terror was palpable. She was no longer the sister he knew. She was a shell of herself, consumed by fear. She kept muttering about the Watcher, her eyes darting around the room, convinced that it was always just behind them, watching, waiting. Every sound was amplified in the stillness of the cabin, the creaking of the floorboards, the flicker of the fire, the wind howling outside. But it was the whispers that truly unsettled Marcus. They were low at first, almost like a breeze, but as the hours passed, they grew louder, more distinct. They were coming from every direction, filling his mind with dread. He couldn't escape them. Alicia's words became more desperate. "It's trying to break us apart, Marcus. It's trying to make us leave. We have to go, we have to get out." Marcus shook his head, gripping her shoulders tightly. "No, we can't leave. Not until we figure out how to stop it. This isn't just in your head, Alicia. I believe you. I'll fight with you, but we can't run." The room seemed to shrink around them as the shadows stretched longer, creeping toward the two of them like living things. Marcus could hear the entity's whispers now, faint, disembodied words that seemed to come from the very walls. They were incomprehensible, but their intent was clear. It was trying to drive them mad, trying to break them down. Then, in the blink of an eye, the cabin seemed to come alive with terror. The windows rattled as if someone was trying to break through them, the doors slammed shut, and the walls groaned under an unseen pressure. The temperature plunged to an unbearable low, frost creeping along the edges of the windows. Alicia shrieked as the shadowy figure materialized before them once more, its glowing eyes fixated on her. "We have to stop it, Marcus. Please." Alicia begged, her voice trembling with fear. She was no longer the calm, logical sister she had once been. She was a broken soul, haunted by the very thing she had feared for so long. Marcus looked around, panic rising in his chest. The fire crackled in the hearth, its flames flickering wildly as if fighting against the freezing cold. He knew they couldn't survive much longer in this cabin. He had to find a way to break the curse, to banish the Watcher. In a desperate move, Marcus rushed to the old bookshelf, scanning it for anything that might help. His fingers brushed over the dusty books until one caught his eye. It was a thick, ancient-looking tome, its leather cover cracked and worn with age. As he opened it, the pages crinkled beneath his touch, the words written in an old language he didn't recognize. Alicia stood behind him, still trembling, as the whispers grew louder, almost deafening. "What is it, Marcus?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the noise. "I think I found something," Marcus said, his voice strained with urgency. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the text. There, at the back of the book, was a ritual. A ritual that could banish the spirit, but it required one thing, a sacrifice. The ritual spoke of a blood offering, a final act that would break the curse, but at a great cost. Marcus knew that the entity had to be faced head-on. There was no running from it, no hiding. He had to confront the Watcher, and it would demand something in return. Turning to Alicia, Marcus' heart sank. "Alicia, this ritual, it's not just a spell. It requires a sacrifice." Alicia looked at him with tear-filled eyes, her lips trembling. "What do you mean?" "We have to offer a part of ourselves," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A piece of our soul. It's the only way to break the curse." Alicia nodded slowly, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Then let's do it. Let's end this." The room seemed to grow even colder as Marcus and Alicia prepared for the ritual. They held hands, standing in the center of the cabin as the Watcher's presence loomed around them. The shadow circled them, its glowing eyes never leaving their faces. They closed their eyes, focusing on the ancient words from the book, willing the ritual to succeed. The moment the words left their mouths, the entity screamed in rage, its form shifting and writhing as if in agony. The shadows flared, flickering like flames. The air became suffocating, the pressure unbearable. But Marcus held his ground. He had to save Alicia. He had to save them both. The Watcher's form solidified, towering over them, its ethereal body glowing with an unholy light. The room seemed to tremble, the walls shaking as if the cabin itself was being torn apart by the force of the spirit's anger. Alicia squeezed Marcus' hand, her body trembling, but her resolve clear. They had come this far, and they would not falter now. "End it," Marcus whispered, his voice steady despite the overwhelming terror that consumed him. With a final, guttural roar, the Watcher lunged toward them, its form shifting into something monstrous. Its glowing eyes locked onto Alicia, the hunger in them clear. It wanted her, had always wanted her. The curse had been waiting for this moment, for her blood, her soul. But Marcus wasn't going to let it take her. He stepped forward, raising his hand, the ancient words of the ritual still echoing in his mind. The Watcher paused, its eyes narrowing in confusion. It had never encountered resistance like this before. The light around Marcus began to grow brighter, a protective aura surrounding him and Alicia, pushing back the darkness. "No," the Watcher hissed, its voice a terrible growl. "You cannot stop me." "We'll see about that," Marcus said, his voice unwavering. As the Watcher lunged again, Marcus finished the final words of the ritual. The entire cabin seemed to explode with light, the walls groaning under the pressure. The Watcher let out an unearthly scream as its form began to disintegrate, crumbling into dust before their eyes. Its screams echoed in the air as the last remnants of the curse were burned away, leaving only silence in its wake. For a moment, everything was still. The wind outside had ceased, and the oppressive chill in the cabin lifted. The Watcher was gone. Marcus and Alicia stood in stunned silence, their hearts pounding in their chests. The cabin, once heavy with the presence of the Watcher, now felt strangely peaceful, as if the oppressive force had been completely eradicated. The warmth from the fire returned, the cold having dissipated in the wake of the ritual's power. Alicia collapsed into Marcus' arms, tears streaming down her face. "It's over. It's really over." Marcus held her tightly, not trusting himself to speak. He didn't know how long they had stood there, but the weight on his chest had lifted. The curse was broken. The Watcher was gone. But something had changed in Alicia. The fear that had consumed her for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of relief and release. She looked up at Marcus, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved me, Marcus. You saved us. Marcus. Thank you for joining us on this spine-chilling journey. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest videos. And make sure to check out the videos popping up on your screen for more thrilling tales. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next